Yes, good afternoon, everyone. I would like to introduce you to this unit. I will be your lecturer throughout the semester, and my name is Mr. Patrick Ngundi. I will be teaching you history of Kenya prior 1884. I introduce you to this unit and urge each and everyone to be cooperative throughout the semester. Definitely let us move forward to listen and to learn the introduction of the introduction to Kenyan history prior 1884. First and foremost, when we say history of Kenya prior 1884, we mean is that history that was there and that was recorded and that is recorded even to date before 1884. What was Kenya and how historical can we record it? Now, the unit code is East 211. The course overview is that this course explores the history of Kenya from ancient times up to 1884, focusing on social, economic, political, and cultural development. We will be guided by the following objectives. Number one, by the end of the course, you should be able to understand ancient history and early human settlement in Kenya. You should also be able to explore the development of various ethnic groups and cultures and their cultures. You should also be able to examine economic activities and trade networks in pre-colonial Kenya. You should also be able to analyze political structures and governance systems of early Kenyan societies. Now, I do ask each and every one of us in this class that you will be considerate on these objectives. One reason behind why we usually have objectives in our studies and in our courses is that when we formulate exams, we formulate them from objectives. Therefore, have that point noted. Why study of Kenyan history prior 1884? Number one, we study the Kenyan history prior to 1884 to understand origins and identity. This is to explore the early human settlements and migrations that shaped the diverse ethnic landscapes of Kenya, to learn about the roots of Kenyan communities and their unique cultural identities. I do believe all of us here, by the virtue of being in university and we have qualified to be here by getting at least a C plus and above in history and government. That's why you are taking history and you are training to become a teacher of history. And I do therefore would like to imagine that you understand when we talk of unique cultural identities, what we mean, and when we talk of the roots of Kenyan communities, what we mean. Like for instance, I would wish to believe that all of you do understand that we have different groups and different communities in Kenya. That is Cushitic group, Bandung group, and also Nilotic and their divisions. I would tend to assume you all understand that. Number two, or the second reason why we study Kenyan history is to appreciate cultural heritage. Or what we say, to gain insight into the rich cultural practices, traditions, and beliefs that existed before colonial influence. Now, if you understand what I'm trying to say, the history of Kenya prior 1884, before 1884, this is the period that the colonizers, the Britons and the German, the French are not yet come to East Africa, and Particularly, they had not even come to Kenya. And therefore, we gain insight when we study this Kenyan history. We gain insight about the Kenyan history before the influence of the Britons, before the influence of the colonizer. How was Kenya? How was the culture? And was the culture better before, and how is it now? By studying Kenyan history prior 1884, we are enabled to relate the culture then and the culture today. And therefore, it is very significant in appreciating cultural heritage. We also recognize values of preserving and celebrating Kenyans' indigenous cultural heritage by the study. Another reason, it's for analyzing economic development. We learn this history prior 1884 or prior the colonizing times so that we may be in a position to analyze the economic development. How has the economy developed? How was the economy at then time? How is the economy today? Also, we learn it so that we may be in a position to relate, to do comparison on the same. Another reason why we study this Kenyan history prior 1884 is that to examine political structures. How are the political structures the then time and how are they today? To relate the political structures. That's one reason why we study. Like for example, we may study the study of Kenyan history prior 1884 may enable us to understand, to interpret the history, the political history or the political structures before 1884 and after 1884. Another reason is the impact of external influence. How has external influence brought about better understanding of history? You know, there are people like Trevorova who said that in their writings, Africans had no history prior 1960s. You see, until the colonizer came, Trevorova argued that Africans had no history, and Kenya is one of African countries or nations. In his argument, he said that before 1960s, when the Europeans had not yet fully come to Africans, we did not know how to write. Therefore, we could not have history. Many historians have argued differently concerning the same. Many other historians, other than him, have also critiqued the same. So one reason behind why we study this history of Kenya prior 1884 is to ensure that we have the information, detailed information, so that we gather better information to give to people. Another reason why we study history prior 1884 is that it can become a job opportunity. Now, when you've the information, like for instance, those who have done philosophy in history of Kenya prior 1884, those who have professors of the same, now they earn through this. It's a source of employment. The study is a source of employment. When you study this history, then it becomes a source of employment, a source of earning. And I would like to give the last, and not the least, reason why we study Kenyan history prior 1884. And this reason is none other than it is a way to appreciate our history. It's a way of appreciating our history. Just as the way we say it's a way of appreciating our culture, it's also a way of appreciating our history. It is very significant. Now, this history of Kenya we are talking about, has also earned challenges. The study of history of Kenya prior the 10 times has earned several challenges. I want us to go through 5 of them, and therefore the rest you shall ensure that in your time following the references I've given to my notes, you can go through them and read more, do more research, and have at least 10. In the exams, I might be tempted to ask you to explain 10 and give you 20 marks. Therefore, do not be limited to these 5. Go further and go and discuss further together with your colleagues. Go further and also ensure that other than even discussing, you do research from various scholars and you will get more. Now, the study of Kenyan history prior 1884 has been succumbed by various challenges. Challenge number 1 is that oral tradition reliability. This history, since we've said that the then time we had no written history and the writings and writing and not yet come to Africa, therefore we must rely, the study must rely to oral tradition. And what are the challenges of relying to oral tradition? Bias. The person giving the history gives history regarding to their understanding and what they love. Therefore, you don't expect someone to explain how the political organization were at the then time when they are not only emphasizing on what they love. They will tell us what they want us to hear. And therefore, the reliability of oral tradition is a challenge. Another disadvantage is scarcity of written records. Since the writings are not yet come to Africa, then these written records were difficult and therefore were difficult to be found, and therefore the study is challenged. You know, when you do not have references to make, when you only rely on oral tradition, do not have written records that are reliable, then it becomes difficult to gather information. Another disadvantage is that language barriers. You know, like when I want to study this information, this history of Kenya prior 1884, I then have to go to different communities to know how they were organized, how their culture was, how they trended with one another. But when I do not have language to communicate to the Luo community when I come from Kalenjin, then it's a challenge. Another disadvantage is finance issues, lack of adequate finance. You see, you must have adequate finance for you to do this research, to move from one community to the other, to understand prior 1884, how were the Kamba community working? How were the Luo community culture related to their Kisii, their neighbors, how are the cultures related? You need a lot of funds to move to hold those communities to learn and to understand. Another disadvantage or the challenge for this that this study may encounter is that the study needs a lot of resources. You need to have a lot of resources for you to understand, to move from one community to the other, to learn and to gather information. You need to have enough information. Having said so, I want us to move to the next subtopic, and it is the definition of now the word history. How do we define this word history? History has been defined by several scholars differently. I want us to come together and look at least 4 scholars who have defined the word history. Now, when we are studying history of Kenya prior 1884, we need to know now what is this history we are studying. Generally, history is a study of facts or of past events, particularly human affairs. Now, if history generally is a study of the first chronological events, or what you are calling first events, particularly in human affairs, how have different scholars defined this term history? Let's begin with E.H. Carr. Defined history as a continuous process of interaction between the historians and its facts. E.H. Carr says that history is a process of interaction between the historians and its facts. You know, history deals with facts. History deals with facts. And therefore, one thing you need to understand is that it is a process as Carr defines it. The other scholar who has defined history is R.G. Collingwood, and he defined history as the science of human actions pursued by human beings in the past. You see, the two we've already now argued about, they are talking of the past. They are talking of relationship between human. You see, this is how we define history. We have Mark Bloch, and this man defined history as the science of men in time. Science of men in time. And we have Herodotus. We will, in the entire time you will be in university, you are going to learn about Herodotus. This man defined history as the father of history. He defined history as an inquiry or investigation. You see, in an exam, when I ask you to define history, and you tell me history is defined as an inquiry or investigation, then you must quote. For this definition is aligned to Herodotus, a man who is referred to as father of history, and we are going to discuss him throughout your 4 years here in campus. Herodotus is a man you are going to hear when we will be studying philosophy of history. It's a man you are going to hear when we will be studying other histories, other units in history. And therefore, it's significant for you to have this man in your mind. Let's move forward to another subtopic, migration and settlement in Kenya. I may be tempted in an exam to ask you what migration is. And migration, in simple terms, is moving from one area to another. Settlement is when you move now from that one area to the other, you now occupy a particular place. Settlement simply means occupying a place and then making it your area. That is settlement. You settle in a particular, like for example, migration of Bantu from Congo to East Africa, to Kenya, to Tanzania, to Uganda, you see. Now, let's come to our main ideas here. Cushitic migration, for example, around 2000 BCE, origin, home of Africa. There is where Cushites are believed to have come from. Settlement, northern and eastern Kenya. They migrated from Horn of Africa and settled in northern and eastern Kenya. Now, their economic activities were pastoralism and agriculture, and the early agriculture. You see, when we are talking of Cushites, some of them, not all of them who are pastoralists, not all of them who practiced agriculture, some of them who settled near lakes. Like, for example, we have talked of them settling in northern Kenya and eastern Kenya. Some of them settled near lakes and rivers. Therefore, they become fishers, and fishing became is also part of their economic activities. Do not be rigid when you are giving me your answers in times of exam. We move to Nilotes. That's just brief about Cushites. Go further study and get notes and write down notes, do research, and prepare yourself for the cards, for the assignments, and for exams. I don't give students leakage, otherwise why am I teaching you? The next topic we are looking, the subtopic is Nilotes migration. They migrated around 1000 BCE. Origin, they originated from Nile Valley region, settled western and southern Kenya. Major groups of these Nilotes are the Maasai and the Luo and the Turkana. Their economic activities majorly is pastoralism. And just as I have said when we were learning about Kushites, you don't have to be rigid. When we say their major economic activity is pastoralism, we don't mean that they did not practice other economic activities such as fishing. For those Nilotes who settled, like for example, the Luo around Lake Victoria, around the lakes, around the dams, they practiced this. Those who settled in highlands, like island Nilotes, for instance, they become farmers. Therefore, their major economic activity was agriculture. So when I say this, I just simply mean do not be rigid. Do not be rigid in your study. Ensure you do something good. You do better research for you to earn marks. My teacher will not entertain nonsense in your booklets. I will need to see content for me to give you any mark. Bantu migration also is believed to have migrated 1000 BCE to 1000 CE. They originated from West Africa. I've talked of Congo area. They settled in central, western, and central Kenya. Like, for example, we have major groups, that is Kikuyu, the Luya, the Kamba community, and the Mijikenda. Familiarize yourself with all that before exam comes in a few months' time. Economic activities of Bantu, they were agriculture, iron workers, traders, among many others, also fishing, craftsmen, among others. So prioritize to read further and you will understand. Now, what were some of the impacts, the effects, consequences of these settlements and migration? You see, in an exam, yeah, I've written impacts of settlement. In an exam, I may ask you, what were the outcomes of the settlement of Kenya, of settlement of communities in Kenya prior 1884? I may ask you, what were the consequences? What were the effects? I will just be meaning the same when you see such terminologies. Do not run away from exam room. I will just be meaning the same. Now, I want to be brief in this. Number one, when you hear of impact, what should come into your mind is yourself. You relate yourself in this way. For instance, see yourself and moving to a particular, moving from, for example, Luo land. I see most of you here are Luo people. See yourself coming from Luo to Kisii. When you go there and then you settle there, one outcome, one effect, one consequence you expect is that the Kisii people will reject you, and therefore there will be fighting. So we talk of one impact or effect as external and internal attack. Now, let us briefly look at what we have here, cultural diversity. So, due to this settlement and migration, different communities interacted and cultures were exchanged. Economic development. For instance, let's say the Mbandu migrating to a land where Nilotes are, therefore we expect that the exchange of culture will be notable. That those Nilotes do not practice circumcision, Bandu do. Therefore, they will borrow the circumcision culture, and then the others will borrow from Bandus the farming thing, the agricultural thing. The Mbandu might borrow the pastoralist culture. You see, cultural diversity. Different cultures land. When we say formation of diverse ethnic groups within distinct languages, traditions, and customs, cultural exchange, and syncretism among different communities. That is simply what I have just explained. Economic development, introduction of high-end tools facilitated agriculture expansion to those communities that did not have, development of trend networks. Like, for example, you see, let me use an example of the Kamba community. The Kamba community, due to this settlement, due to this migration, they were in a position to trend with other communities and get other better goods than what they had. Similarly to other communities live along the Kamba community. There are also political structures, emergence of various governance and systems from clan-based to centralized kingdoms, political leadership vested in chiefs, elders, among others. Social organizations. How did the settlement impact social organization? How did it impact political structures? How did it impact economy? Now, we've said that it impacted economy in that different communities learned various economic activities that they did not have. Now, here in culture, we said different communities borrowed different cultures that they did not have. We've also seen that now, social organizations, for example, how did it impact? How did this settlement impact social organization? There were disunity here and there. There were problems, killings here and there, attacks. So it impacted social organization in many different ways. Go further and summarize, write various notes, and expect an essay question from this particular subtopic. Now, how do you expect questions to appear in your exams? Number one, question number one, I may ask you to explain the impact of settlement in Kenya and give you 20 marks. When I give you 20 marks in such a question, what do I expect from you? I expect from you to give me the positive impact, the negative impact, each point well explained, and each point to be given 2 marks. Like, for example, the question explain the impact or the effects of the settlement of communities into Kenya. That is question that will carry 20 marks, for example. You give me a point and explain 10 points. Then you earn yourself 20 marks. I expect you to have 80 points, then introduction and conclusion. There is another question you may also expect. Discuss the factors that led to the migration of Kenyan communities. One, this question you may say that I have not discussed above there, but it's a question that you may reason. As I was discussing the notes, I've gone through it on that. I know the students here who do not like using critical thinking, they may not have seen those points. Like, let me briefly give you 5 factors. Factor number 1 that led to the migration of communities is search of pasture. Like, for example, a good example, give an example of plain Nilotes who are pastoralists. They migrating in search of pasture for their cattle, and that was one of among factors that led them to migrate from wherever place they were migrating to wherever they settled. Others migrated because of this factor of internal attacks. To escape internal attacks, communities migrated as another factor. Another factor that led to the migration of communities from different areas to settle in Kenya is the factor of fertile lands for farming. Like, for example, Bantus who are farmers, they were searching for better areas where they would get fertile soils for farming. Another factor that led to the migration of communities from one land to another is a factor of external attacks, due to attacks from external extents. Some communities migrated. Now, I do not want to give you all the factors because it is your duty to go read. It's your duty to go and summarize notes. It's your duty to go and do research. And therefore, let us meet in the next class. Gentlemen, I'm done for today. Please let us meet in the next class.